Good tidings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Landy Lodge podcast. Before we launch this episode, we have some special people we need to thank, those special people being the sages of the lodge. The beautiful names you see displayed on your screen are the kind-hearted souls who donate to the lodge on a monthly basis. Without them, we simply would not be where we are today. If you would like to support the Landy Lodge for as little as $1 a month, just look for the link in the episode description. But now, without further ado, let's get on with it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Landy Lodge. Big friend of the podcast is back for his, what is this, your fourth or fifth episode? Who knows? We're losing count.
Either way, love being on. Love being on.
Exactly. We love having you. And today, we're going to talk about if Nintendo here in 2021 is becoming the new Disney. Now, look, there's a particular thing that sparked this conversation. But before we get into that, for the people who are watching and for myself, I'm going to need you to explain what we're looking at in your background.
Well, we're in my studio right now, so this just happens to be up. But it is a commissioned piece, actually, and I recently finished it. It's for my friend Sean Samuels, who lives in Oregon. So I have to ship it in the next week. So I'm, looking forward to doing that. But he wanted something that was a representation of failure and of success, and the want of failure and the pitfalls of failing and also the allure and the unreachable nature of what success is. Just a lot of people. So the three symbols of success here, this would be love, friendship, social. Over here would be power, status. And the third one here is inner peace, self-acceptance. And, we got people over here on the failure column climbing over themselves, stepping on each other, trying to find their way up to the top, right? And then you got, someone who's taking care of someone who's sick and hurt. This other person's looking through the window and looking at all this success, but has given up, essentially. You got another person doing a similar thing over here. You got someone, none of them have arms. There's a lot of different ways that you can interpret this, but essentially they get to the top and this guy jumps over and it's telling a story.
I love it. Honestly, I think it's really cool. And big shout out to Sean. I know he's a good friend of ours. But that's cool, man. For those who don't know, Mr. Robinson here is an artist and a massage therapist who is very good at what he does. And before we start getting into this, this episode is with no ill will towards the company of Nintendo. It's worth mentioning, dude, the bedrock of our friendship runs through Nintendo. We grew up, we've known each other since we were 5 years old. And one of the first things we connected on was things like Legend of Zelda, Mario Kart, Banjo-Kazooie, the whole thing. So this is no ill will towards Nintendo, but I want to give you the floor. If you could let people know, what is the story that sparked this conversation?
So here we are, 25 years later, still having this conversation about Nintendo. And specifically, we recently played a D&D 5e Pokemon edition that this man made.
So a Dungeons & Dragons Pokemon edition.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, dude.
It was. Honestly, it was a really great way to interact with the world. The same way that you would see in the movies or the cartoons that we had as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I know it was a pleasure for me to play some of these characters. I know I threw in a few goofy anime people and some interesting storylines in there.
You did a great Team Rocket.
Thank you. Yeah. I honestly, every single time Jesse and James came into the picture, I just reveled in singing the song. I couldn't help myself. And I knew it was going to be annoying, and I knew that it was good because it was annoying for Ash and all of them too.
It was perfect, dude. It was perfect.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you had a good time. But unfortunately, not many others can have that good time. It's recently been taking off the internet. I looked just recently to see if there was any links to the player handbook or anything really. The app, that
So
we
it's been completely scrubbed.
yeah. As of March 12th, 2021, Pokemon 5e is no longer playable, and its Discord server is no longer active due to the takedown notice delivered by the creator. And this is from Nintendo's backlash on it, as well as Wizards of the Coast, who owns D&D, both multi-billion-dollar companies.
Wait, so this was a conjoined effort between Nintendo and
Yeah.
wow.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
They both sent him lawsuits and everything, and he decided that he was not going to fight it, which I don't blame him.
No, you don't. You're not going to win that fight. Like, even if you had a case, those companies have so much money, they'll just out-lawyer you. And then they will prolong the case until you go broke. So guys like him just don't stand a chance.
Definitely not. And I feel really bad for him too, because
he put so much work into it, dude.
There was so much work into that. I honestly, I'm a little flabbergasted by it. I feel terrible for the guy.
Well, look, I just want to jump in and say, like, I don't understand. I do. Look, at the end of the day, this is Nintendo's intellectual property. They have the right to do this. But where I come from is letting people play Pokemon D&D doesn't hurt Pokemon. I mean, let's take our crew, for example. We finished our Pokemon Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and what happened? Half of us went and booted up old Pokemon games. Charlotte just bought new Pokemon Snap. Like, it didn't take away from Nintendo's profits. If anything, it gave us a hunger for that Pokemon world and wanting to engage with it again. So, at the end of the day, like I said, they have the right to do this. They are in the right. But I don't understand the incentive. I don't understand how they think this helps. To me, this hurts them. I don't understand. I'm less enthusiastic about the Pokemon world knowing that Nintendo has done this.
Here's my theory. There have been countless amount of games being made on emulators, like using the
assets
format or the Pokemon Red format, and they make their own storylines, and things were like going along the journey of Ash Ketchum, from all the way from beginning and seeing the story through.
No, I've seen that. There's some mods out there that have modded those old games so that you're not living Red's story, you're going to live Ash's story, and it's pretty cool.
Honestly, there are a lot of really good renditions of the Pokemon games that they've made, but again, they haven't been taken off. You can go to their website and download these games. I think the thing with Pokemon 5e is that this is where Pokemon is going. I think they're trying to get to a place where the Pokemon world feels more alive, and Pokemon D&D, I think, does it so well, or at least creates the format that's so well that they're intimidated. They don't want it out there. They don't want any competition moving into their next phase of making the world more engaging.
See, now that's why I'm interested to see what the fallout of this whole saga is, right? Because then if I'm Nintendo, if your theory is right, then shouldn't they be hitting this guy up and giving him a job?
We don't know if that's the case. It could potentially be.
That would perhaps ease the wound a little bit. But look, at the end of the day, this isn't the first time Nintendo's pulled something like this. And it just seems like in recent history, Nintendo is pulling more and more of these copyright moves on people. And it started, as a big fan of Nintendo, it's starting to get a little upsetting, to say the least. And then when I say things like, is Nintendo the new Disney? I want to put things in perspective for people. Disney has been awful with copyright laws, like plain and simple. There's a story, there's a kid who he was born and he had a disease where he was going to die young. And he loved Spider-Man. That's the thing. The parents decided they were going to let him live. They'd give birth to the kid. And he loved Spider-Man. That was his favorite thing. And the kid's disease, unfortunately, took his life when he was like 4 or 5 years old. And the father wanted to put a picture of Spider-Man on the tombstone. Disney pretty much clamped down on him and was like, oh, no, you don't. And that's, there's stories like that across the board about both Disney and Nintendo. But at least anecdotally, from me, speaking as a content creator, I use some of Disney's stuff. Like, I make Kingdom Hearts content. And, Kingdom Hearts is owned by Disney. I don't get any copyright strikes. I don't get nothing. Like, Mickey Mouse himself would be in my video. No copyright strikes. But Nintendo, if I make a Zelda video out there and use stuff like that, there's a chance that they come and they want a piece of the pie. So I don't know what you've seen on your end. Do you think Nintendo's starting to walk down the road to become the new Disney? And for those who think that might be a little hyperbolic, do keep in mind video games are a bigger industry than movies right now. And Disney makes their bread with movies and theme parks. But now Nintendo's got video games, which make more money than movies. And now with Universal Studios, they're opening theme parks. So what do you think? Is that the road we're going down here?
Well, I think it's a story as old as time. You know that these copyright laws have been around for a while, and Disney did it first. You know, Nintendo came a little bit after that. Of course, it's still in our childhood, and I think these large conglomerates using these characters the way that they do for archetypal purposes see the value in the repetition that they have by bringing the character back over and over and over again. It creates familiarity. It creates dependability on the how good the game is going to be or how enjoyable the movie is going to be to watch. The thing with the Disney, which is pretty astonishing, what I just read just recently, was back when the copyright laws were like every 14 years. You need to renew the copyright, or you no longer have copyright laws. Disney actually changed the law and made it over 100 years the copyright limit. So now they literally are just like pushing the deadline to how long they own these characters with their money and their power and their status. And I can see this Nintendo doing the same and reaping the benefits.
It's a bit of a touchy subject, right? Because I do believe in intellectual property. I do think that if you are an artist or a storyteller and you create a character and you create that story, I believe that that character and story belong to you. But it's worth mentioning the way these laws were originally written is they were supposed to be, and it might be 14 years, like you said, but I think it was a little longer, closer to 50. Again, everybody who's listening, we're not experts on this stuff, so feel free to fact check us and look this up for yourself.
Keep pushing the deadline. It's over 100 years now.
Yeah, but what I was originally going to say is, I think the way they were originally written is no matter how much you renewed it, when you got to a certain point, it went into the public domain. So that theoretically, the way they were originally written is that if you and I wanted to make a Mickey Mouse cartoon, we would have the legal rights to do so. But if I'm not mistaken, Disney changed those laws too, so that these intellectual properties never got into the public domain without consent.
So essentially what we're saying here is Nintendo is basically riding on the bootstraps of Disney's copyright.
I mean, you see the similarities between companies. I mean, at the end of the day, they're entertainment companies that rest on the coattails of a recognizable character. And it's worth saying, more people recognize Super Mario than Mickey Mouse now. And that is not something to take lightly.
Not at all.
Nintendo is on the come up. And I think they're still per gross income, or they're the biggest company in Japan. Like the biggest, so they've already become their nation's Disney. It's starting to feel like it's only a matter of time before they become an international Disney. It's starting to feel that way anyway.
Yeah, totally.
But let me ask you, do you see them going down the road Disney went? Like, you see how Disney's been operated the last 30 years, where it's like, instead of inventing new things, we're just going to buy up other people's stuff and then remake them in our image, which sometimes it works, looking at you, Marvel, and sometimes it doesn't. Do you think Nintendo's going to eventually go down this road where they stop relying on their own merits to come up with new things, and they're just going to take the money in the bank and buy other people's ideas?
Well, when it comes to cultural, symbols, it takes a while for them to develop, be well-known or well-loved across generations. And so I think it is the best strategy to buy from other titles and to take, say like buying the Assassin's Creed franchise, or going in a different direction and taking another symbol from a different company.
Like buying Crash Bandicoot, right?
Exactly. Yeah. These symbols they're already tried and true. They check out. People love them. People will buy them, and it costs more work and it's more risk to create a new character than it is to buy one that's already successful, already in minds.
Do you think there's something dangerous about that, right? Because part of what Nintendo has going for them is they are really good at coming up with new ideas. They are really good at making new characters and new stories and new franchises. I mean, outside of Mario and Zelda, looking at the franchises that are popular with Nintendo now, the Splatoons, the Xenoblades, like they weren't there when you and I were growing up. The ones that were there when you and I were growing up, the Star Foxes, the Earthbounds, they've kind of gotten pushed to the back seat. So Nintendo actually has a pretty good track record of they're not creatively bankrupt is the best way to put it. Whereas with Disney, and this will get me in hot water with some people, if you ask me, I think Disney as a corporation is creatively bankrupt. Now, look, the stuff they're putting out with Marvel is really cool, right? But these are stories that have been told in the comics. It's nothing new. It's nothing fresh. They haven't made a new Marvel character. It's either just reskins or recontextualizing it and using plots that have been previously written in comic books and graphic novels the last 50 years. You know, I mean, to their credit, they tried to do something new with Star Wars, and it didn't work. I know there's some people who like it. You are free to like it. I'm not here to bash it. But if you look at the numbers, the sequel trilogy made less money every single installment. So it didn't stick. That's not typically how a trilogy works, right? You could argue Dark Knight Rises is the worst of the trilogy, but it made the most money because it was a successful trilogy. It kept people engaged. So that's part of what I'm a little bit worried about is if Nintendo keeps walking down this Disney road, they're going to stop trying to invent new fun things like Splatoon, and they're just going to rely on, well, look, that company over there is doing something smart. Why don't we just buy them out? And that's part of what I'm worried about. Do you share that concern? Do you see that happening?
I do share that concern, but also I'd like to answer your first question on.
I do tend to ramble.
Yeah, it's okay. Your concern about the danger of having one company that owns a lot of the creative content. You know, as cultures for millennia, according to Joseph Campbell and his search going around.
We love him here at the Landy Lodge, by the way. You're speaking our language.
No, without a doubt.
Which, hold on. It's worth saying, for those of you who enjoy my hero's journey content, this is the man who introduced me to the book. So please carry on. I just wanted to give you your due.
Okay, thank you. According to the way that their cultures were shaped was around the stories that they were told, and they had very similar tropes. They had very similar characters, and these characters were told generation after generation after generation, which shaped the psychology and the minds of the people in the group. That told them stories of morality on how they need to stick together to survive, or how fire is a good thing, and if it goes unchecked, it can burn down the whole forest, and there will be nothing left to take from the world. You know, that's just one of many stories that have been told over and over and over again. That we are now hearing today in a different format, whether it be movies or video games or comics or or books. Regardless, these kind of stories, that ones that resonate with people, the ones that find their ways into childhood experiences and even into adulthood kind of listenings, are usually video games, at least for our generation. Sure, we have our movies that we watch and other things, but the media that I think speaks to me the most are games. And I find it dangerous that certain companies can have a monopoly on this, because then they can shape the psychology and the mindset of entire generations across the world.
100%. Now, it's important to mention there's a fine line between propaganda and storytelling, right?
Yeah.
Storytelling is when you ask a genuine question and you let the world you built flesh it out and find out what the answer is. Propaganda is when you go into it with, I want to send this specific message, even if you believe it to be a good message. If you go into it with, it's going to be this message, and that's propagating your ideas. It's propaganda. And what can be scary is if a company like Disney or a company like Nintendo, like you're saying, has a monopoly on these stories, then our culture is at the whim of what they think is good messaging. And look, at the end of the day, not every company, not every story is going to be perfect. But this is where competition is important. Because if you and I decide, hey, look, the lessons in these Disney stories, they don't reflect my values. The lessons in these Nintendo games, they're not reflecting my values. The good news is, in today's world, well, you can take it over to any other company you want. You can take your business over to Square Enix. You could take your business over to Sega, to Atlas, and give your money to them. But if we live in a world where, Disney is starting to look this way, buying up Star Wars and Marvel, if you let one company have a stranglehold on the culture's mythology, and say what you will, Marvel and Star Wars, those are modern mythologies. If you let one company have a hold on them, then your culture is at their whim. And even if they have good people running the company today, doesn't mean there are good people running the company tomorrow. So I know that's where my fear comes from. It is worth saying, though, even though Nintendo is not necessarily very friendly with these copyright laws, it's worth mentioning, I don't see anything negative going on in their storytelling. I see good lessons being taught. They tell stories that transcend politics, which is what our culture needs more than ever right now. But to throw the rag back on them, let me tell you a cease and desist story on Nintendo's end. So, as you know, we have a friend, let's give Matt Petrovich a shout out, right? Who he loves to play Super Smash Melee on his gaming PC, right? Mm-hmm. Now, as you know, the last year, we've all been pretty much locked down. Nobody could go to E3 or Comic-Con or any of this stuff. So a lot of people got together and wanted to have an online Super Smash Brothers Melee tournament. Nintendo sent a cease and desist letter. And this is what confuses me. It's like, what are you doing? These are people who love your product. These are people who love your game. And all you're doing is you're basically telling them to take their business elsewhere. If I was going to be in that tournament and I spent like a week or two, who knows, more. These people probably spend more training, you're battling, simulating. And then this happens. I say, you know what? I'm going to go play Street Fighter. I'm going to go play Soul Calibur because I know those tournaments won't get shut down.
So the only thing I can think of that could potentially could be the reason why they would send a cease and desist letter for something like this, among other things, is that if I were a lawyer for the opposite side, right, who were not on Disney, not on whatever, and I was defending my client's copyright, whatever situation,
right.
And they argued, well, this is a copy of our standard. Well, as a lawyer, I would say, well, I can name 100 to 200 to 300 different things that are all copyright that you just looked over. And now, because you're focusing on my client, you think, so basically with each occasion of copyright that goes unnoticed, that goes unchecked to a certain magnitude, to a certain degree, it diminishes their argument for future prosecutions. So it's best interest to get as many people as possible that are under their limelight or on a larger scale to secure that copyright under in the courts, essentially, moving forward.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, it's worth saying, like,
the only reason I can think.
Nintendo has the right to do these things, whether it's shutting down the Melee tournament, whether it's shutting down Pokemon Dungeons and Dragons, and whether it's Disney not letting Spider-Man be on the tombstone. At the end of the day, these companies have the right. These are their intellectual property. And I guess my only argument here is I think this hurts them so much. Like, I like if I was in their PR department, I'd be like, this is such bad press, guys. I'm not sure you want these hands. However, it's worth saying these companies have us by the balls. Like, what am I going to do? Not buy the next Zelda game? What am I going to do? Not buy Pokemon Legends Arceus? Like, no, because, and the part of what makes that tough is, like, I don't want to boycott the developers. The developers aren't the ones making these decisions. The developers are the ones who put their blood, sweat, and tears into these characters and these stories and these experiences, and they don't deserve to be boycotted for, like, when it's not even them that's making the decision. It's a bunch of guys in suits and ties that are shutting this down. And that's why I don't know how you feel. I'm not sure boycotting is the right answer because, again, this is not at the fault of the developer, the designers, the writers. This is not their fault. And I'm not sure it's necessarily right to boycott their work.
Let's see. So you're asking me for what the answer would be?
Well, I'm asking what you think. Do you think any sort of boycott is what can get these companies to pay attention, or do you think there's another thing, something else that can be done?
No, there's a lot of money you will not. A lot of people who will not boycott, and also a lot of these games can be replayed on future consoles. So even then, after the original couple of years strike of all Nintendo products, you know what I mean, you're gonna break down and realize shit didn't happen, and then you're just gonna buy that shit again. I don't know.
It's tough. It's a tough situation. I mean, Nintendo. Look, again, it's worth saying. We both love Nintendo. It's at the bedrock of our friendship. But something else worth mentioning. I know you don't have a Switch, but the Switch has essentially an app, two apps, one that lets you play old NES games and one that lets you play old Super Nintendo games. And one of the most frustrating things about this, one of the things I can never wrap my head around, is that these apps, which are essentially, and people have what would the word be? They've dove into the code and seen that these are basically just ROMs and emulators running on their server. So it's beyond me how the Switch has been out 4 years now, and some of the best games on those platforms are missing. And it's as simple as a ROM and an emulator. And there's no Super Mario RPG. There's no Earthbound. Like, we're missing all of these classics. And it's like, what are you doing? What's going on here? These games are 40 years old. What, do you want proof that I already own them before you give them to me for free? Sure, I still have the cartridges. But it's decisions like this that are really sort of getting me a little
amped.
I think amped is the right word. I don't know. I don't blame you.
There's something to say about sustainability. There are things that, for example, were created back then where you would buy a refrigerator, right? And that shit would last you, 100 years. But of course, that refrigerator company went out of business because there was no longer, You
were only selling one product for a customer.
Exactly. So companies learned from this and they started making refrigerators that broke after 10 years. Or stoves that just didn't work after a little amount of time, And I think the video game industry has a similar sort of take on it, where they're taking games from the past and reusing it, but they're doing it haphazardly.
Haphazardly, or in my opinion, in a greedy stand. So, like, if there are any Fire Emblem fans out there, I don't mean to offend you on this, but the old Fire Emblem that originally included the character Marth was never localized in the West. So they finally localized it, but they repackaged it and sold it to you for $60, an NES game. And look, don't get me wrong, they were cool. They had cool features and like an art book and all these cool stuff around it, all these bells and whistles. But essentially, they found an excuse to sell you a 30-year-old game for $60 when it's like, no, assholes. You have the NES emulator as an app on the Switch. It should just be there. And then if people want the art book and the stuff, and they could just buy it on your online store. Don't hold people like hostage with their nostalgia and make them buy an old product so they can get cool features like an art book. When it's like, no, just sell them the art book and put the game on the service. I don't know. Maybe that's greedy of me. I don't know. Just my opinion. I like, what are you?
There are people making $100,000 a year, sit in a room 9 to 5, 5 days a week, coming up with these ideas to make Nintendo money. Honestly, there's just so many occasions of this. It's literally somebody's job to fuck us out there. Okay, it's not just for comedy purposes. Not the big Nintendo. No, it's Joe Schmo fucking sitting in an office. How can I make Nintendo more money? Really good game.
And I'll tell you. Here comes a prediction.
Buy it again.
Here comes a prediction. I'm going to make a prediction. So Nintendo fans have been begging for Mother 3, which is the Earthbound series. They've been begging for Mother 3 to be localized in the West. And everyone, they're very cute. Everyone's very cute. They're acting like Nintendo's just going to put this on the Super Nintendo emulator. I'm like, no, 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 no. They know how bad you all want this. They're going to package it, give you an art book and another little bell and whistle, and sell it to you for $60, a 30, 40-year-old game. But because they know the West wants it so bad, they're going to find a way to package and sell it to you for $60. Now, listen. I understand we all have these things we love. We all have the series we love. I'm not one to talk. I am a shill for the things I love. Okay. I paid full price for Kingdom Hearts 3 on PC, even though I've already got it on my PS4. But there I went and spent $60 all over again. So we all do this. I don't want anyone to feel like I'm personally attacking them if you're a Fire Emblem fan or something. But something has to be said for this. And I think we, as consumers, have to do a better job of not letting these precedents be set. And now I'm a bit of a hypocrite because, again, I've made purchases against those values. But I'm starting to see that if they go unchecked, they're just gonna keep doing it. You know?
Yeah. I wish I had a solution for you. To be honest, it's
a sticky situation.
They hold the keys. You know, they make their own rules, and if it comes down to it, you wanting to purchase or have access to a game, you're going to spend the money. You know, it's sad, but it's a strategy they're doing against the public for the pursuit of greed, not exactly for the well-being of society. And they have different primary motivations.
And I just want to pause you, right? Because I just want to pause you for a sec. Because, look, there's nothing wrong with a company making money, okay? Companies have to make money to survive. There's nothing wrong with a company making money. But maybe instead of reselling you a 30-year-old game for $60, they could just make a new game. And I get it. Nintendo makes plenty of new games. But, I mean, not lately. But let's talk about that. We've ragged on Nintendo for a good while here. I want to talk about the good aspects of maybe them becoming the new Disney. Because let's be real, they're essentially becoming the Disney of the gaming industry, right? Yeah. So, E3 is coming up. People expect Nintendo to have a lot of big announcements. Now, I know you still play Nintendo consoles, but you haven't gotten your hands on a Switch yet, but there are games you want to play. Let me ask you, what do you want to see from Nintendo in the future?
I want to see world immersion. Being inside of the world, having, I would say being able to interact with the characters, in a different way. It's a little bit feels more lifelike.
Can you compare it to another game or series that you would like to see them sort of emulate?
Dungeons and Dragons. To be honest, yeah.
Best answer.
Best
answer you could have given.
I think Dungeons and Dragons is not perfect, but it's one of the greatest role-playing games of all time. And it's been formulated in so many different ways and improved over the last 40, 50 years, probably even longer than that. And it offers a quality of gaming that is you cannot get in video games. But that future is not so far away. I see it happening with AR, VR. General technology moving forward. That kind of gaming experience in the video platform will be available.
Well, let me ask you, wouldn't you agree that RPGs in video games, since they've begun, have been trying to emulate that D&D experience?
Yeah, without a doubt. I actually wrote a whole research paper about it in college.
No kidding.
The whole reason I got to it was because as a joke, because I thought the class was a joke, I was going to do a whole research paper on why Dragonite was the best Pokemon. And the information that led me to Dungeons and Dragons, which I'd never played before or knew anything about, was that the Pokemon system was based off of the role-playing game. that there was a direct connection to that type of turn-based combat and the stats and all of the small little nuanced numbers that go into each Pokemon's move and its HP. You know, like these are like there was a framework that was created in some nerd's room 80 years ago that evolved over time and turned into the gaming that we see today across all of our platforms. And I think that's the ultimate goal. I think the ultimate goal is to bring these worlds into lifelike creation, to log in and be there.
Is that the RPG singularity? Is when Dungeons and Dragons and video games truly become one at the end?
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. But I need you to unwrap this now. In all your research, did you find that Dragonite was indeed the best Pokemon?
With first edition, yes. It was
better than Mewtwo and Mew.
Oh, okay. Maybe not. Definitely not better than Mewtwo and Mew.
Okay, so leaving out legendaries, he's the best.
Leaving out, I would say he's the best. Yeah, definitely. His speed, his special attack and everything. I don't know.
And there wasn't a lot that could stop a dragon back in Gen 1.
No, not at all. It paled in comparison. I mean, the best he had was probably Gyarados or Seadra or something. I mean, dragons ruled.
So let me ask you. You, sir, I want to wrap it up like this. I know we've been talking about, is Nintendo becoming the new Disney? We don't have a lot of time left. I think if we were to sum it up, we'd say tentatively they seem to be going down that road, but they haven't overextended themselves. Because when I look at modern Disney and I look at what Disney is now, I feel like in a lot of ways they've overextended themselves, right? They bought up Marvel Comics and they made awesome movies. And the TV shows, I haven't seen them yet, but I've heard good things.
I'm enjoying them.
Yes, but it's worth saying that Marvel Comics, like the comic books, are dead. They're dead. Disney bought Marvel Comics, essentially abandoned the comic industry, took the brand and made it in their own image and said, nope, Marvel is a cinematic product now. And look, they still make Marvel Comics, but the bar has been set so low. Like, I think you only need to, and this is an approximate, but I think you only need to sell like 30,000 copies to be a top-selling comic for Western comics right now. Meanwhile, you got manga, which is piling up in the millions. Yeah. And it's just, this is where I have a little bit more faith in Nintendo, because I wonder if it's a cultural thing. Because when I look over at Japan, even when they have something like manga, which is absolutely killing it, they don't let it compromise anime and vice versa, right? The success of anime doesn't compromise the manga, just like the success of manga doesn't compromise the anime. Yet when I'm looking over here in the West and I look at Disney, what I'm seeing is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is compromising Marvel Comics. And when you look at Star Wars, the modern Star Wars Cinematic Universe completely threw out the expanded universe of Star Wars. All those books, all those comics and graphic novels have been rendered non-canon. They completely abandoned that market. And just, so it's like, I have a little bit more faith over in Japan because I've seen them do it. I've seen them that manga and anime don't compromise each other, whereas over here, the cinematic and the print seem to compromise each other.
Yes, the way that anime and mangas, they're kind of putting together and they're reinforcing each other. One will lead to people watching the movies or watching the show, and others, the show will lead to people watching the manga, trying to getting ahead of it or seeing what happens next. So the sales of one, increase the sales of the other. While I see this, again, your point with Marvel, going into a very similar conversation with what we were having earlier about taking content and putting it in the vault and making it unavailable until they bring it back to the surface and they say, give me $60 for this. You know, who knows what the future of Marvel Comics is going to be. You know, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of platform in the future that offered these comics for a set price. Or
so you're saying instead of, because they struggle, and this is what I'm saying, where I don't want Nintendo to become creatively bankrupt, where they struggle to make new Western comics that capture millions of people, where they struggle to do that. What you're saying we can expect is they're going to take the old classics, you know, the Jack Kirby and the Stan Lee issues, put them in the vault, and then resell them to you at a top dollar as classic. Here's
exactly.
classic. Yeah. And you see, that's what I'm afraid of.
And at the same time, keeping you really hungry for new content. Every time that new Marvel TV show comes out, or that new episode, or that new movie, you haven't had any Marvel, you haven't read any comics, there's nothing new that you've seen in a while, and you're gonna go see it. You're gonna go watch it, and you're gonna spend top dollar to see it sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
And the more they starve you of content from the past, because you're already hooked, you're already in, you're already a customer, the more they're going to influence you to buy in the now at the highest price, while giving them the opportunity to resell content of the past.
And I think you're 100% on the money. And it's a terrifying thought. But let me tell you what else I think is hurting comics. Not just Marvel, but DC as well. It's worth saying DC comics aren't doing great either. Mm-hmm. You know, dude, like the Western comics in general don't do well. And you can't just leave it as, well, nobody wants to read that anymore. Because then you look at manga sales and you're like, well, people clearly want this medium of entertainment. You know, but can I tell you what I think is really hurting Western comics is we have an obsession of like alternate universes or like alternate versions of characters, right? Like there's no alternate Goku, right? There's no like universe B Goku and he has his own show, and then there's universe A Goku and he has his own show. There's one Goku, right? There's one, you know, as opposed to, you know, take Spider-Man, for example. Even though I really like Miles Morales, I think what hurts the industry as a whole is that like you have all these different iterations of one character, and it's like, you know, these characters, they become a mantle as opposed to becoming a character itself. You know, like I'm saying, whereas there's only one Goku, there's only one Edward Elric, there's only one Kirito from Sword Art Online. Pick your anime, it doesn't matter to me. There's only one, really. You know, actually, I gotta pause myself. There are two Edward Elrics, but that's just with anime. In the manga, there's one Edward Elric. That's it. Anyway, the point still stands.
Yeah.
Whereas with comics, there seems to be an aversion to making new stuff, and it's like, how do we just reskin the old? You know, whereas with manga, like, you know, you have Dragon Ball Super manga that's coming out right now, and it's selling like hotcakes. You know what I'm saying? Why? Not, you know, Akira Toriyama didn't say, hey, let's reboot. It's been 10 years. Let's just reboot the whole Dragon Ball universe and tell a new story. No, he's continuing the same chronology. This is why they threw GT out. He's continuing that same chronology, and that's what's bringing people back, because they know when they come back, they're getting that one Goku, that one Gohan, as opposed to, you know, who is Batman anymore? Depending on the comic you pick up, he could be a completely different person, right? In the new Batman movies, he's killing people and firing guns. And it's like in the Nolan trilogy, he was against killing people and against guns. So it's like there's two different Batmans living on top of each other, and I prefer one to the other. So I'll pay for the Nolan trilogy, but I'm not going to pay for the Snyder stuff. So it's like, go ahead.
The only thing I can think of to explain this is that when it comes to animes, the artists can draw the character as he grows and as things develop, and you know, and even if the artist passes away, there are other artists out there that can emulate the same sort of style and to reinforce the story over and over and over again. And when it comes to live action films, like certain stars, like our Spider-Mans, right, are, this is a kid that's growing over time, and over a couple years, 5, 6 years of stardom, he's no longer that kid Spider-Man anymore. So we need to find another actor and a new storyline because it's a different face.
And all that's doing is making me lose my interest because I'm like, how many times do you want me to watch Uncle Ben die?
I agree.
You know?
And that's why I think Marvel's missing an opportunity by making the animations, because then you can really build the story. I mean, they have a good strategy, and for the most part, but it's only going to last for the next 50 years until.
If that, I got to be honest with you. I think Marvel peaked. I don't think they're going anywhere. Let me make that clear. I don't think they're going anywhere, but the cinematic universe has peaked.
They're gonna have to start over. Yeah.
We'll see. But look, we're coming up on time. I want to give you time for a closing statement and to maybe let people know what you got going on and stuff. But it's been really nice talking to you. This was a good conversation. As always, you're always welcome on, but the floor is yours. Let's wrap this up.
Great. Love talking about video games and being here on the show with you, of course. But I do spend most of my time massaging people and helping them through their pain. I found that I'm very good at dealing with upper body pain and headaches and neck pain and things to that such. So if you're out there and you're in the Long Island area and you're looking for some pain relief or at least relaxation purposes, give me a call. You can reach me at will you put my information in?
All your information will be in the description. Don't worry.
Great, thank you. Cool.
So check the description.
Yeah. I have an office in Glen Cove, so Nassau County is great, but I also live out in Suffolk, so I cover the entire island. So I'm here.
So if you're trapped on this island and you need a little relief, you hit up my boy J-Rob. He's got you. I'll tell a quick story before we sign off. We used to be on the same softball team before you moved way out east. And do you remember the time where I had to come out of the field and like, dude, I think I fricked up my arm. And you were like, give me 5 minutes. And you just like went in there, felt around. And the next thing I knew, I'm like, this feels better than it ever did. So my man here is the real deal. If you're trapped on the island and need relief, he's your guy. Let's sign this thing off. Thank you, everybody who tunes in, everybody who watches on YouTube. Thank you, my man John, for coming on. And a big shout out to the Sages of the Lodge. We couldn't do it without you. But without further ado, let's sign this one off. Peace out, everybody.